Clutch Points has an article with three possible trade suggestions for the Chicago Bulls this coming season. Plus, one of our favorite guys from Bulls on Tap has an article grading the Josh Giddey deal. Going to get right into that straight after this. What's going on, Bulls Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Whole Lotta Bull. I'm Troy. You can follow me on Twitter at Bulls_Troy. And you can also follow the show at Whole Lotta Bull. Okay, so now we know the offseason that the Bulls have had. We've finally got the Josh Giddey deal done. We've made the Lonzo Ball for Isaac Okoro deal, drafted Noah Essingay. Now, Clutch Points put out an article with three possible trade targets to keep an eye on for the Chicago Bulls this upcoming season. And this one comes from Rowan Bramart, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now, he does say, after a strong offseason, the Bulls are eyeing a playoff spot in the weakened East. Here are three trade targets that could elevate Chicago. One of these players should absolutely catch the eye of Bulls fans because it basically becomes it's a long-term position of need for the Bulls. Now, the one player that we have been hearing about all off season is Jonathan Kuminga of the Golden State Warriors. There's been talk about the Bulls have had potential interest in Kuminga in a sign and trade deal. Reportedly, Kuminga has had interest in coming to the Chicago Bulls. And at this point, it looks like that he may be taking the qualifying offer with the Golden State Warriors, as opposed to the latest offer being apparently a 3-year, $75 million deal to return to the Warriors. It's clear that he doesn't want to be there. It's almost just as clear that even though apparently Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green have said that they want Jonathan Kuminga back in Golden State, that the Warriors don't really seem to want him back. And so yeah, he definitely appears to be someone that should be on the move by next offseason at the latest. So he's one of the potential trade targets that this article from Clutch Points does have for Chicago. The other one being a former Portland Trailblazer, now Boston Celtic in the Drew Holiday deal, being Anthony Simons. Now, Anthony Simons could be a potential in a scenario in which possibly next offseason that Kobe White decides he wants to leave the Chicago Bulls and find somewhere else to play. Man, Anthony Simons could be a replacement for Kobe. Now, in saying that, if Kobe White was to walk, and this is, also a potential where Jonathan Kuminga could be an option next off season, where if he signs the qualifying offer, he becomes an unrestricted free agent. Maybe that's where the Bulls potentially look to bring him in next off season and play Io at the starting two and Kuminga up at the three, or with Anthony Simons. The Boston Celtics brought him in, but was immediately back on the trade block. It looked like, from the Celtics' point of view, they were just trying to get off of Drew Holiday's contract, and figured that maybe they might be able to move on quite quickly from Anthony Simons. He's not someone I'd ideally look at bringing into the Bulls as a Kobe White replacement. I'd rather just slot Io into the starting shooting guard position. But the third player that does have the most intrigue for me as a Chicago Bulls fan and looking at the long term and position of need is Utah Jazz center Walker Kessler. Now, when it comes to Kessler, he's a much more defensive presence than what Nikola Vucevic is. Now we all know that Vooch is going to the final year of his contract, a three-year deal that he had. So more than likely, well, some of us hope more than likely that the Bulls do finally move on from Nikola Vucevic. Maybe he decides to move on from the Bulls and wants to go play for a title contender, even though he has said he is happy in Chicago and would like to remain. And who knows, the Chicago Bulls may want him to remain as well. And, as has been suggested by Hayes over at Chicago Bulls Central, maybe that this could be another Lonzo Ball situation where maybe they try to find a deal for Nikola Vucevic at the deadline. Can't get anything done. He signs a little 2-year extension, maybe at a cheaper price, and then maybe you find a deal for him in the off season. And the numbers that Hayes brought up on his episode of Chicago Bulls Central today, in terms of the impact that Walker Kessler makes defensively in comparison to Nikola Vucevic. Now Hayes brought up in his show today that from I believe it was from 0 to 6 feet from the basket, in comparison to Nikola Vucevic, Walker Kessler's opponents shoot 11% worse from 0 to 6 feet from the rim than what Nikola Vucevic's do. And then from 0 to 10 feet, I believe it's like 10, it's still about 10% difference. Now, Walker Kessler doesn't have the offensive game that Nikola Vucevic does. That doesn't mean to say that he can't develop it. That he does appear to have some form of a back to the basket game. Obviously doesn't have the shooting range that Vucevic does, but he makes up for that for his he more than well and truly makes up for that with his defense. And that's something that the Bulls in the long term, especially if you're going to, we've got Josh Giddey coming back on a 4-year deal. If Kobe White comes back long term as well, yes, we do have Isaac Okoro as a 2/3 perimeter defender. I'd assume is there who can play the perimeter defense as well. But if you're starting backcourt long term, it's going to be Kobe and Josh Giddey. Now we know that Josh Giddey is here for the long term. Kobe White we still yet to find out that answer. You do need a primarily defensive big man down in the paint to help cover up some of their lack of ability out on the perimeter defensively. Now he's one of the best, I believe, by the numbers, he's actually the second best shot blocker in the league behind only Victor Wembanyama, and he's right there just ahead of Rudy Gobert, I believe it was. Now, and also Kessler does fit into the Bulls' direction of young players with experience. He's only 24 years old. He came in and this is the wild part. The Chicago Bulls could have had him in the draft. He was right there for the taking, but they decided to go with Dalen Terry instead. And for those who want to say, "Oh, but we had Andre Drummond." No, we signed Andre Drummond after that draft. The Bulls could have had their immediate backup center and then long-term projected starting center in Walker Kessler in that draft there. But instead we got DT, which DT is improving and he's got that dog in him, but he's not going to be anything more than just a rotational piece at this point. Whereas Walker Kessler does project to be a long-term starting center in this league and one of the better rim protecting shot blockers in the league, period. So the that's definitely one move that Arturas kind of showed was completely fucked up, to be quite frank with you. He should have drafted Walker Kessler over Dalen Terry, but that's in the past now. Now, the part where I'm a bit concerned in a potential acquiring of Walker Kessler is how do you get him? Now, if you're gonna try and go out and get him this at some point up to the trade deadline this coming season, well, then you're gonna be dealing with Danny Ainge. And he's one of the last people I want the Chicago Bulls to be making any form of trade with whatsoever. I mean, people think that Sam Presti ripped off the Bulls in the Josh Giddey, Alex Caruso deal, with the Bulls not receiving any draft compensation to come along with Giddey because we gave up our best trade asset in Alex Caruso. And there was another deal there where apparently the Golden State Warriors actually turned down an offer from the Chicago Bulls of Alex Caruso for Jonathan Kuminga. I'm telling you right now, I'm glad the Bulls got Josh Giddey over Kuminga. Not even in question. If you're gonna offer me one of those two trades, Caruso for Jonathan Kuminga or Caruso for Josh Giddey, I'm taking Josh Giddey every single friggin' day of the week and twice on Sundays. No ifs or buts about it. But when it comes to Walker Kessler and trying to acquire him from the Utah Jazz, you're dealing with Danny Ainge, who, let's be frank, he wants draft picks and as many as he can get. Now, if he's going to trade Walker Kessler, it's not going to be as simple or, you know, a Dalen Terry and the Portland pick, for example, straight up. Or I'm not even sure if a Nikola Vucevic, if the Utah Jazz have the salary cap space to absorb Vucevic's remaining salary, because Vooch is on 20 million, and Walker Kessler's in that $4 to $5 million range. Not sure if they have the salary cap space to make it work, but hey, they can definitely take a Dalen Terry. They can definitely take a Javon Carter. It's not going to be as simple though as if they just want to get in draft picks and not exactly necessarily worried about the players they're receiving back. Danny Ainge is going to want a plethora of draft picks. He's probably going to want three unprotected first round picks. He's going to want pick swaps, like probably two or three pick swaps. He's going to want the Portland pick as well. So when it comes to making a trade with Utah, I'm going to have to say no, and I will wait for the Bulls to go after Walker Kessler in free agency next season. I believe he's on the free agency market as a restricted free agent, and maybe the Bulls can make an offer to Walker Kessler that seriously makes the Utah Jazz think about whether they want to bring him back at that price. Now, what kind of price are we potentially looking at bringing in Walker Kessler to Chicago as a restricted free agent? As talked about, I think this was a number that was thrown around by Hayes and Pat, the designer, on Locked On Bulls when they spoke about this article as well. I think that was about that $20 to $22 million range. I think that's around the price point for a starting center, especially one of Walker Kessler's abilities in the league, and that's a price I'm not mad at paying. Now, let's also keep it real as well. The NBA in this day and age, as opposed to back in the 80s and 90s, they pay on potential, on the potential of what you can bring, not what you have done. You know, we've seen videos of Michael Jordan has spoken about this in the past, about that exact very thing. Players get paid on potential, whereas guys like Michael and Scotty and Magic and Larry, they got paid on what they have done in the past, not what they could do in the future. Because like hell, Michael could have been getting $30 million a year back in the early '90s when they go, oh, we finally got one title. Well, we could get X amount of titles with Michael. Let's pay him all this money to see what he could potentially bring us. That's not how it was back then, but that's definitely how it is today. Players are paid on potential. And Walker Kessler, he's a player that I would definitely highly consider paying around that 20 to even $24 million. You're already now people. It's not going to be another Patrick Williams situation who's getting $18 million a year flat for the next 4 years, because at least Walker Kessler, he's going to bring an elite skill. And the same goes with the Josh Giddey contract. He was also bringing an elite skill or two elite skills to the Chicago Bulls team. Giddey with his playmaking and rebounding as a guard, Walker Kessler as his with his shot blocking and paint protection. These guys are bringing elite skills, unlike Patrick Williams, who's what does he bring that's elite? Absolutely nothing. So that's where Patrick Williams was paid on potential and probably also probably a bit of hope from the Bulls front office on, hey, maybe if we give him this kind of contract as security, it might relax him and he might actually start producing finally. Well, hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. So when the Bulls are handing out any sort of contract, I really need Bulls fans to stop thinking about the Patrick Williams deal. Patrick Williams is a special case all on his own. He's a lost cause. Let's be frank. And but at the same time, I hope that Patrick Williams does come back next season and proves me to be an absolute idiot. And he actually shows something that he's been that Bulls fans have been hoping he's going to show basically his entire career now. Now, when it does come to the other guys that were mentioned in this trade targets, when it comes to Jonathan Kuminga and the way that Clutch Points write this article, they described him as a two-way wing. Now, this writer who wrote it, name again, Rowan Bramart. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, or at least pretty close. How much Jonathan Kuminga have you watched? Because he sure as hell ain't a two-way wing. You don't play defense. Last time I checked, two-way meant they play both ends of the court and are good at it. Jonathan Kuminga is a player that needs the ball. And again, this is another perfect description of what Jonathan Kuminga would probably be in Chicago. And it's something that we've gotten away from. And again, I believe it was Hayes and Pat on Locked On Bulls who used this comparison. It's like getting like another DeMar DeRozan type player. But Jonathan Kuminga is just not as good as DeMar DeRozan and probably won't ever be. But he's a guy who needs the ball in his hands to be the best version of himself, and quite frankly, doesn't fit into the type of style that the Bulls are trying to play. Up tempo, the ball moving and popping, guys moving off the ball. Jonathan Kuminga is a guy who needs the ball in his hand to be the best version of himself. And whereas Anthony Simons, he's basically kind of the same player. He is a 3-level scorer, but he does need the ball in his hands to be the best version of himself. So those are guys I just personally I don't want on the Chicago Bulls roster. So if we're going after any of these 3 players in this article, it is 100% and only Walker Kessler. All right. Now, our guy, we all love this guy, Phil from Just Another Year Chicago Bulls, also put out a video today about this article. Uh, so shout out to our guy from Bulls on Tap. Most of you guys know him as local Bulls fan, Alejandro Delgado. Put out his grading of the Chicago Bulls re-signing Josh Giddey. Now, if Alejandro doesn't mind, I'm going to read a fair chunk, and if Bulls on Tap don't mind, I'm going to read a fair chunk of this of the article. Now, the Bulls and Josh Giddey agreed to a 4-year, $100 million deal. Yep, we all know that. We all know that it was a drawn-out negotiations, and it was starting to believe that could Josh Giddey potentially settle for the qualifying offer, bet on himself again, and get into unrestricted free agency next year. Ultimately, Giddey did resign for one of the richest deals in Bulls history. Now, as it stands right now, it would probably be the second richest deal in Chicago Bulls history because he's only the second player to sign a $100 million guaranteed contract. The first being Zach LaVine when he got his 5-year max deal. And obviously, we've seen Derrick Rose sign. He signed a $95 million deal. I think it was a 5-year deal. And obviously MJ back in the day. And it's actually crazy. If you put the money that Michael got in the 97 and 98 seasons with this salary, the percentage of the salary cap that Michael got paid, back then and put that into today's game, he's I believe, and I had Doug Tonus work this out for me quite some time ago now. I think it was around the mark of something like over $100 million that Michael would make in today's league on the same percentage of cap that he got paid back in '98. Now, I think back in '98, the salary cap was like $52 million, and Michael got 30 of that. So absolute crazy. Back to this article from Alejandro. Now, Josh Giddey is going to have the 78th highest paid. He's going to be the 78th highest paid player in the league. And as Phil from Justin the Chicago Bulls pointed out, he's the 19th highest paid point guard in the league. It's not a bad contract whatsoever, especially from the production that you're going to get from Josh Giddey. Now, you look at some of the players that are alongside him, that, as Alejandro mentions in this article, Kyle Kuzma and Dylan Brooks. Yeah, I'm taking Josh Giddey over those two. Now, Dylan Brooks is a pest defensively, given that, but like for the most, he's a good 3 and D player. But for overall package of a player, I'm taking Josh Giddey over Dylan Brooks, and I'm sure as hell taking Josh Giddey over Kyle Kuzma. Now, he goes on in this article to say, shockwaves hit the internet when Arturas Karnisovas didn't immediately agree to Giddey's demand for a 5-year, $150 million contract after the Thunder won the NBA Finals. Point note again, I picked Oklahoma City Thunder to win that last championship directly after they were knocked out of the playoffs the season before by the Dallas Mavericks. That was with Josh Giddey assuming Josh Giddey was still on the roster. Okay, Karnisovas is known for quickly overpaying players, leading many to expect he would match Giddey's demand. Instead, the Bulls' first offer was 4 years, $80 million. After negotiations, that number reportedly rose to $88 million and finally to $100 million. Excluding the fifth year, Giddey saw both sides gave up $20 million to make the deal work. While the fully guaranteed deal seems even, the Bulls failed to use their leverage over a restricted free agent. Slight overpays like this have repeatedly limited the organization's flexibility. Still, the Bulls keep a positive relationship with Giddey as training camp approaches. Now, where Phil responded to this article, and which I'm going to in it as well. Again, this is all done in love to Alejandro. He already knows this. So for those who want to get type and say, "Oh, you're taking shots at him," no, he all knows this is he already knows this is in love. And as we've said, no, me and Alejandro have said in my Discord on Whole Lotta Bull Discord, if everyone agreed to everything, the world would be boring. It is what it is. So all in love, Alejandro. Um, So yes, both it was actually a great deal that both sides negotiated. Both teams, Bulls only wanted to offer $20 million. Giddey wanted $30 million. They met smack bang in the middle with one less year on that as a only being a 4-year deal as opposed to a 5-year deal that Josh was seeking. But I don't think this is an overpay in the slightest whatsoever. And again, he's only the 78th highest paid player in the league at $25 million a deal. $25 million a year average annual value. Now we're seeing that according to Spot Rack so far, the contract's going to start off in that $22 million range, and by the fourth year, get up into 27. The percentage of the cap on this, and this is where people need to retrain their way of thinking when it comes to the money that players are making. He's only making 14.5 to 15.5% of the salary cap. It's not that big a contract at all, and it's actually quite. And regardless of my personal opinion of being a Giddy fan, $25 million $25 million a year for a player of Josh's abilities and what he can bring to a team is a perfectly fine contract. Now, if I want to put on my Giddy fan hat a little bit, he should got paid a bit more. But I think so. Alejandro gives this deal a C plus. Now, with the slight overpays repeatedly limited the Bulls organization's flexibility. Well, going again, Alejandro, this is where I'm going to disagree with you, buddy. The Bulls are going to have, at this stage, have potentially the highest amount of salary cap space next off season. And at this stage, it's going to be around that $80 million a $80 million in actual salary cap space. Now, will that change if they re-sign Kobe White? Of course it is. Will that, what's going to happen with free agents that come up in coming up to next off season? Are they going to sign, new contracts with the current teams? Absolutely, that's definitely a possibility. So who knows on that stage? And having all that cap space could mean absolutely nothing in terms of signing free agents. But we all know in this day and age that most free agency is not what it used to be. So the Bulls having this salary cap space coming up next off season is going to be primarily used to either go after a restricted free agent, whether that be a Walker Kessler like we spoke about before, whether that be like a Jalen Duren, who I would love to see the Chicago Bulls make a play at. Because to me, while yes, he does fit Detroit basketball, I think he'd perfectly fit Chicago Bulls basketball as well. Or the salary cap space could be used in a way of trading in for a star player, which I think is probably more the case of what the Bulls might be trying to do. Whether that actually happens, who knows? That's a whole nother kettle of fish. But to say that it it hampers the Bulls' flexibility just based on the salary cap space, that's just incorrect. But yes, the Bulls do maintain a relationship, like a good relationship with Josh Giddey coming into training camp. So then Alejandro goes on to say, as far as the Josh Giddey side of this goes, Giddey clearly values himself as a high level player, and rightly so. However, he recognizes that he has a lot to prove, especially since he was not seeking a maximum rookie scale extension. And that's important to note when a lot of Bulls fans out there were going on about Josh is after so much money. He was not after the maximum rookie scale extension. He just wasn't. That's pushing over $40 million a year. He wanted 30. He signed for 25. He wasn't getting anywhere. He wasn't asking for anywhere near that max rookie scale extension. To assert his position, Giddy made it uncomfortable for Karnisovas by choosing not to sit with the team during the summer league and by skipping Billy Donovan's induction into the Hall of Fame. Instead of letting the lackluster free agent market intimidate him into signing a deal, Giddy remained strong. Interestingly, it seems that Cam Thomas' decision to accept the qualifying offer from Brooklyn Nets placed more pressure on the Bulls to finalize a deal. And it's actually quite funny that Giddy came to an agreement with the Bulls not that long after Cam Thomas decided to roll with the qualifying offer from Brooklyn. Now, when it comes to the part where Giddy chose not to sit with the team during summer league. Now, while yes, Giddy was in Vegas at one point, probably to have some discussions with Torres Karnisovas and Billy Donovan. We all know that he caught up with Billy Donovan for lunch while he was in Vegas. People also need to remember as well that for the most part, Josh Giddey was actually here in Australia and with junior basketball camps that he's been running pretty much the entire off season. And that's also a reason as to why he was not at Billy Donovan's Hall of Fame induction because he's been here in Australia running junior basketball camps. And now, just recently, he's also been watching his Australian AFL team, Hawthorn, playing in the AFL finals. Their season is now finished after losing last night. So Josh Giddey was in Melbourne for that footy game. Hawthorn season's over now. So I would anticipate that Josh Giddey might be very well soon getting on a plane to get back to Chicago and sign that contract in person, like once it came out that he had agreed to that deal, Casey Johnson reported that that Josh was going to be back in Chicago within a matter of days to sign that contract. Looks like that should be happen. I would dare say that should be happening pretty soon, unless Josh Giddey is planning on staying for the AFL Grand Final, which is next Saturday here in Australia, and then he'll be back on a flight to Chicago. But he could be back on that plane back to Chicago any time now. So for Josh Giddey's side of it, he grades this deal as an A. Well, considering that, yep, he gave up 20 million, but the Bulls also came up 20 million as well. It was a good move. So overall, from Alejandro, the Chicago Bulls are the only team that could offer Giddey the chance to play his style of basketball, and they failed to capitalize on that. In contrast, Giddey did not waver from his desire to get paid, but by no means did the Bulls repeat last offseason $90 million mistake given Giddey's production in comparison. Both parties gave up equal value, and hopefully the Bulls aren't in a situation they once again face the consequences of slightly overpaying a player. Overall grade for that one being a B. So, no, I don't think there's any danger of the Bulls facing consequences of slightly overpaying a player, with this one being in Josh Giddey. Obviously, now Alejandro, you can tell me if I'm wrong, mate, but I'm assuming, when you bring in last year's offseason's $90 million mistake, you obviously directly comparing that to Patrick Williams. I don't think it's going to be the case whatsoever with Josh Giddey. I just don't, because Patrick Williams doesn't even have a heartbeat at this stage, and yeah, Josh Giddey, he's unlike Patrick Williams, where we can say that Josh is only 22 years old and about to turn 23. Yes, Patrick Williams is only 23, but Josh Giddey has shown improvement each and every season. He knows his shortcomings, and he knows he needs to work on them, and he has been putting in the work this offseason, especially on his 3-point shooting. So for those who've been seeing the videos of him getting around in Melbourne, you can see that shot release has sped up quite a bit. It's nowhere near as slow as it was. So overall, look, hey, a very good article from Alejandro. Um, we know that Alejandro is not the biggest fan of a tourist kind of Chauvis, and hasn't been the biggest fan of Josh Giddey. But hey, very well written article by him. So go check out his work on Bulls on Tap. He's a great dude, and hey, while I don't agree with Alejandro on this one, much love to Alejandro. He's a good mate. So go support his work over at Bulls on Tap. All right, guys. So little quick notes to make before I head out of here for the day. So the Bulls Media Day is set up for September 29th at the United Center. So we're only 9 days away from Media Day, and then training camp will open up the following day. And then within a matter of less than a week after that, we've got some preseason basketball. So Media Day is the unofficial, or maybe in some of you might call it the official opening of the season. We're only 9 days away from Media Day. Bulls basketball is back very, very shortly. Cannot wait. Final thing before I wrap it up. I'm sure you've seen the the posts from Phil at Just Another Year Chicago Bulls. Next Saturday my time. It's next Friday night, 5 p.m. Chicago time. I believe it's 3 p.m. West Coast time in the USA. It's going to be 7:30 a.m. my time here in Adelaide. Phil, Hayes, Jamal from Bull Central, Miss Melissa Francesca, formerly of Balls on Tap, and myself, we're going to be bringing you Basketball Without Borders. And this is going to be a project that Phil has put a lot of work into making this a reality. Getting basketball podcasters, not just from the US, but from around the world as well. Sorry, and I forgot to include a guy from C Red UK, Neil Dunn. Neil, I'm sorry. Um, my bad. But and Neil from C Red UK put in an absolute fire, absolute fire promo video for this podcast coming next week. Again, so for the Australians watching, so 7:30 Adelaide time next Saturday morning. And for you guys over in the States, it's 5 p.m. Chicago time. So be on the lookout for that one. Next week, we will be live. So can't wait to chop it up with Hayes, with Phil, with Neil, with Mel, with Jamal. It's going to be an absolute epic episode. So can't wait for that next week. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me on this episode of Whole Lotta Bull. Don't forget, you guys can follow me on Twitter at Bulls_Troy, and you can please follow the show at Whole Lotta Bull. Like and subscribe to the page, to the channel if you haven't already. Uh, and let's get this thing building. So until next time, Bulls fans, see red, be good. Peace.